The stars looked different from the bridge of the horizon's edge. Captain Lee Jimin stood with his hands behind his back, watching the blue giant sun of the Valtorian system grow larger on the viewing screen. His reflection stared back at him from the dark glass, a young man with tired eyes and the weight of an entire species on his shoulders. "We're approaching Valtros Prime." "Captain," said Park Hyun from the navigation console. His voice was steady, but Jimin could hear the nervousness underneath. This was humanity's first contact with a major galactic power. Everything had to go perfectly. Jimin nodded. "Slow to approach speed. Send the greeting message again." Choi Mirai worked quickly at her station, her fingers flying across the communication panel. "Message sent, sir." "They're responding now." She paused, listening to her earpiece. Her eyes went wide. "Captain, they're rolling out the Imperial welcome. Full ceremonial guard. The Empress herself is coming to greet us." The bridge went silent. Even the steady hum of the ship's engine seemed to quiet. Jimin felt his heart beat faster. Empress Kalira never greeted anyone personally. She was the ruler of 300 worlds, a being who had lived for nearly 1,000 years. Lesser kings and presidents waited months just to speak with her advisors. "Why would she come herself?" Hyun asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. Jimin shook his head. "I don't know. But we'd better not keep her waiting. Prepare the shuttle. Full diplomatic dress." 20 minutes later, Jimin walked down the shuttle ramp onto the landing platform of the Imperial Palace. The structure stretched up into the clouds, made of some material that shifted between silver and gold in the light. Thousands of alien beings lined the walkway, representatives from dozens of species. They all wore elaborate robes and jewelry that marked their status. But Jimin's eyes were drawn to the figure at the end of the crimson carpet. Empress Kalira stood twice as tall as a human, her skin the color of polished obsidian with eyes that glowed like molten amber. She wore armor that seemed to be made of living metal, flowing across her body like water. A crown of what looked like frozen starlight rested on her head. Beside her stood a younger female, smaller and more delicate in appearance. Her skin had a crystalline quality, catching the light and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. She was beautiful in a way that made Jimin's breath catch, but there was something sad in her eyes. Jimin stopped before the Empress and bowed in the human fashion. Hyun and Mirai followed his lead. "Empress Kalira," Jimin said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "On behalf of humanity, I thank you for receiving us. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our peoples." The Empress studied him with those burning eyes. When she spoke, her voice resonated in his chest like distant thunder. "Captain Lee Jimin of Earth, your species is young. You have barely left your home star. Yet you come before me with courage. This pleases me." She gestured to the female beside her. "This is my daughter, Princess Valara. She is the light of my empire, beloved by all who serve me." Valara bowed her head slightly. Jimin returned the gesture, unsure of the proper protocol. "Come," the Empress continued. "We shall speak in the Hall of Contemplation. There is much to discuss." The hall was enormous, with walls that seemed to show the night sky itself. Stars moved slowly across the dark surface, galaxies spinning in ancient patterns. A long table of white stone dominated the center of the room. The Empress sat at its head with Valara on her right. She gestured for Jimin and his officers to sit opposite them. "I will speak plainly, Captain," Kalira began. "The galaxy is more dangerous than your people know. There are empires that would see humanity destroyed simply because you are new and weak. There are creatures in the dark places between stars that hunger for worlds like yours." Jimin felt a chill run down his spine. "We've encountered some hostility, yes. That's why we're seeking allies." "Allies," Kalira repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, that is what you need, protection, guidance, a place in the greater order of things." She leaned forward. "I can give you this. The Valtorian Empire can shelter humanity, bring you into our trade networks, share our technology. Your people would never need to fear conquest or destruction." It sounded too good to be true. Jimin glanced at Hyun, who looked equally suspicious. "What would you ask in return, Empress?" Kalira smiled, showing teeth that gleamed like ivory daggers. "In my culture, the strongest alliances are sealed with bonds of family. When two houses join through marriage, they become one blood, one purpose. Betrayal becomes impossible, for you cannot betray yourself." Jimin's stomach tightened. He thought he knew where this was going. "I offer you my daughter's hand in marriage. Captain Lee Jimin. Princess Valara shall be your wife, and through this union, humanity and the Valtorian Empire will be forever linked." Your children will be heirs to both our peoples. Your species will have the full protection of my fleet, my armies, my resources. The silence that followed was absolute. Jimin stared at the Empress, then at Valara. The princess kept her eyes downcast, her face unreadable. Mireille made a small choking sound. Hyun's mouth had fallen open. Jimin found his voice. Empress, I'm honored, truly, but this is unexpected. I'm just a ship captain. I don't have the authority to make such a decision. You are the first human to stand before me, Kalira replied. You represent your species in this moment, and I am told that humans value individual choice, yes? I am offering this to you, Captain. Not to your governments or your councils. To you. She stood, and everyone at the table rose with her. I understand this is much to consider. You have 3 days. On the evening of the 3rd day, you will give me your answer before the assembled court. All the great houses of the Empire will be present to witness. Kalira turned to leave, then paused. Know this, Captain. No species has ever received such an offer from me. Some have waited centuries just to request it and been denied. Choose wisely. She swept from the room, her guards following. Valara remained for a moment, finally meeting Jimin's eyes. He saw fear there and loneliness and something else he couldn't name. Then she too was gone, leaving the 3 humans alone in the vast hall. What just happened? Mireille whispered. Jimin sat down heavily, his legs suddenly weak. I think I just got a marriage proposal from an alien princess. Not just any princess, Hyun said grimly. The princess. Jimin, if you refuse, we might be declaring war on the most powerful empire in the galaxy. Jimin put his head in his hands. 3 days. He had 3 days to decide the fate of his entire species. Jimin couldn't sleep. He lay in the luxurious guest quarters the Empress had provided, staring at the ceiling that displayed a perfect simulation of Earth's night sky. The constellations mocked him with their familiarity. Home felt impossibly far away. A soft chime announced a visitor. Jimin sat up, pulling on his uniform jacket. Come in. The door opened to reveal an elderly Valtorian male, his obsidian skin marked with silver patterns that denoted age and wisdom. He bowed slightly. Captain Jimin, I am Lord Trennock, keeper of Imperial history. The Empress suggested I might help answer any questions you have about our culture. Jimin gestured to a chair. Please sit. I have many questions. Trennock settled himself carefully. I imagine you do. Let me begin with the most important fact. In 2,000 years of Valtorian history, the Empress has offered a royal marriage alliance only 7 times. Each time it created a bond that lasted millennia. The species who accepted became some of our most trusted allies. And those who refused? Jimin asked quietly. Trennock's expression darkened. There have been no refusals, Captain. To refuse such an honor is to say that your people consider themselves above alliance with us. It is an insult that demands response. Military response. Jimin felt the weight of those words settle on his chest. So I don't really have a choice. Oh, you have a choice, Trennock said gently. But every choice has consequences. If you accept, humanity gains protection, technology, and prosperity. Your people will be safe. If you refuse, he didn't finish the sentence. Tell me about the other alliances, Jimin said. The successful ones. Were the marriages happy? Trennock looked surprised by the question. Happy? They were successful. They produced heirs that unified bloodlines. They prevented wars. Happiness is not the measure of a good alliance, Captain. Maybe it should be. The old historian tilted his head. You humans are very young. You think in terms of individual happiness rather than collective survival. That will change as you grow older as a species. You will learn that some sacrifices must be made for the greater good. After Trennock left, Jimin walked the palace gardens. The plants here were alien and strange, with flowers that hummed in harmonics and trees that seemed to bend toward him as he passed. The moons of Valtros Prime hung in the purple sky like 3 great eyes watching him. You walk as if you carry mountains on your back. Jimin spun around. Princess Valara stood on the path behind him, dressed more simply than before. Without her formal robes and jewelry, she looked younger, more vulnerable. Princess, Jimin said, bowing. I didn't hear you approach. I am good at being unnoticed, she replied. It is a useful skill in the palace. May I walk with you? They moved along the path in silence for a while. The garden was peaceful, filled with the strange sounds of alien insects and the whisper of wind through crystalline leaves. You're troubled by my mother's offer, Valara said finally. I'm troubled by the choice, Jimin admitted. Accept and save my species or refuse and doom them. It's not really a choice at all. Valara stopped walking. And what of me? Do I get a choice? Jimin looked at her carefully. Do you want this marriage? She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Want? I'm a princess of the Valtorian Empire. What I want has never mattered. I was born to be a bridge between peoples, a treaty written in flesh and blood. My mother has groomed me for this role since I was old enough to understand words. That doesn't seem fair. Fair? Valara turned to face him fully. Fairness is a luxury for species that don't have to think about survival. My mother rules 300 worlds. She makes decisions that affect trillions of lives. If sacrificing my personal desires creates peace and prosperity, then that is what must be done. But even as she said the words, Jimin could hear the doubt in her voice. Do you believe that? He asked gently. Valara was quiet for a long moment. I have to believe it. If I don't, then my entire life has been a waste. All the years of training, of learning to be what others need me to be, of burying who I really am. It all has to mean something. Who are you really? Jimin asked. The question seemed to shake her. I don't know. I've been a princess for so long, I'm not sure there's anything else underneath. Jimin felt a surge of sympathy for her. I have a younger sister back on Earth. Her name is Yuna. When she was young, my parents wanted her to be a doctor. They pushed her toward it constantly, made all her choices for her. She was miserable. He smiled at the memory. One day she just stopped. She told them she wanted to be an artist, that she needed to make her own decisions even if they were wrong. It nearly broke our family apart. But she was right. She's happy now, painting and creating, and my parents eventually understood. Your sister sounds brave, Valara said softly. She is, braver than me. Jimin looked up at the 3 moons. She used to say that a life lived for others is no life at all. That we only get one chance to be ourselves and we shouldn't waste it being what everyone else wants us to be. Valara stood very still. On Earth, do women choose their own husbands? Yes, and men choose their own wives. Sometimes people don't marry at all. It's a personal choice made freely. That sounds terrifying, Valara whispered. And wonderful. They walked further into the garden, and Valara told him about her life in the palace, the endless lessons in diplomacy and history, the ceremonial duties that filled her days, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw her as a symbol, rather than a person. Jimin shared stories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs, of the freedom to choose your own path even if it led to failure. He talked about love, about the human idea that marriage should be based on mutual affection rather than political necessity. Have you ever been in love, Captain? Valara asked. Jimin nodded. Once. Her name was Unji. We were both young, both training to be pilots. We thought we'd explore the galaxy together. His voice grew sad. She died in an accident during a test flight. That was 5 years ago. I'm sorry. The point is, we chose each other. Nobody arranged it. Nobody benefited from it politically. It was just 2 people who found happiness together, for a little while. That's what marriage should be. Valara touched his arm gently. You're going to refuse my mother's offer, aren't you? Jimin met her crystalline eyes. I don't know. If I refuse, I'm condemning billions of humans to potential destruction. How can I be that selfish? And if you accept, Valara said quietly, you're condemning both of us to a life we didn't choose. How can you be that selfless? She left him alone in the garden with those words echoing in his mind. Above him, the 3 moons continued their eternal watch, offering no answers, only light in the darkness. The morning of the 3rd day arrived too quickly. Jimin stood before the mirror in his quarters, adjusting his dress uniform for the 10th time. His hands shook slightly. In a few hours, he would stand before the assembled court of the Valtorian Empire and give his answer. An answer that would change everything no matter what he chose. Hyun and Mirai came to his quarters an hour before the ceremony. They looked as nervous as he felt. We need to talk, Hyun said, closing the door behind them. One last time before you make this decision. Jimin nodded, sitting down heavily. I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 days. Then you know what you have to do, Hyun continued, his voice urgent. Jimin, you have to accept. I know it's not fair to you or to the princess, but we're talking about the survival of our entire species. Billions of lives are depending on this choice. Mirai shook her head. That's exactly the kind of thinking that justifies any action, no matter how wrong. If we're willing to trade people like property just to ensure our survival, What does that say about us as a species? It says we're practical, Hyun shot back. It says we understand that sometimes the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This isn't about Jimin's personal happiness. It's about Earth, about humanity's future. And what future is that? Mirai demanded. One where we compromise our values the moment they become inconvenient? Where we tell ourselves that we're different from the empires that practice slavery and forced marriage, but we're willing to benefit from those same systems? Jimin listened to them argue. These two people he trusted more than anyone. They had been with him through every danger, every first contact, every difficult decision, and now they stood on opposite sides of the most important choice he would ever make. Stop, he said quietly. They both fell silent. I know what I have to do. I've known since last night, Hyun leaned forward. And? Jimin looked at his friend. I'm sorry, Hyun, I'm going to refuse. Hyun's face went pale. Jimin, you can't. Please think about what you're doing. I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else. Jimin stood, walking to the window that showed the vast expanse of the Imperial City. My sister Yuna once told me that the moment you start treating people as means to an end, rather than as ends in themselves, you've lost your humanity. I didn't understand what she meant then. I do now. That's beautiful philosophy, Hyun said bitterly. But philosophy won't protect Earth when the Valtorian fleet arrives to punish us for this insult. Maybe not, Jimin agreed. But if we're going to survive as a species, we need to survive as ourselves, not as a pale copy of every other empire that treats people like chess pieces to be moved around a board. Mirai stood beside him at the window. I'm with you, Captain. Whatever happens. Hyun was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're going to get us all killed. But I suppose if we're going to die, we might as well die as humans. He managed a weak smile. At least it'll be interesting. The Hall of Assembly was the largest room Jimin had ever seen. It could have held a small city inside it. Thousands of alien beings filled the tiered seats. Representatives from every species under Valtorian rule. They wore their finest clothing, their most elaborate decorations. The air hummed with dozens of languages, hundreds of conversations. At the far end of the hall, Empress Kalira sat on a throne made of polished black stone that seemed to drink in light. Princess Valara stood beside her, dressed in ceremonial robes of silver and blue. Her face was a mask of composure, but Jimin could see the tension in her posture. A deep gong sounded and the hall fell silent. All eyes turned to Jimin as he walked down the long aisle toward the throne. His footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet. Hyun and Mirai walked 2 paces behind him, a show of solidarity. Jimin stopped before the throne and bowed. Empress Kalira, her voice boomed through the hall. Captain Lee Jimin of Earth, 3 days have passed. You have consulted with your officers. You have walked in our gardens and spoken with our scholars. The time for contemplation is over. Now you must choose. She gestured to Valara. Do you accept the hand of my daughter in marriage, and with it, the eternal alliance between our peoples? The silence was absolute. Jimin could feel the weight of thousands of eyes on him. He thought of Earth, of the billions of people who would never know how close they had come to either salvation or destruction. He thought of his sister, of Yunji, of all the people who had fought and died so that humans could be free. He thought of Valara, standing there like a beautiful statue, waiting to learn whether her life would be traded away. No, Jimin said clearly. I cannot accept, the hall erupted. Aliens jumped to their feet, shouting in languages Jimin didn't understand. Some sounded outraged, some sounded shocked. The noise was overwhelming, a wall of sound that crashed over him. Empress Kalira raised one hand and silence returned instantly. Her amber eyes burned into Jimin like twin suns. You refuse? Her voice was dangerously quiet. You, a captain of a species barely able to leave their own star system, refuse an alliance with the greatest empire in the galaxy? Yes, Empress, I refuse. And you understand what this refusal means? The insult it represents? The consequences it will bring? I understand, Empress. Kalira's hand gripped the arm of her throne so tightly that the stone cracked. Then you will explain yourself, Captain. Before all assembled here, you will tell me why your primitive species considers itself too good for mine. You will give me a reason or I will give you war. This was the moment. Jimin had rehearsed this speech in his mind 100 times over the past 3 days. But now, standing before the most powerful being in the galaxy, all his careful words fell away. He spoke from his heart. I don't refuse because humans are too good, Empress. I refuse because we're trying to be better. Better than we were. Better than we are. He took a breath. Let me tell you a story about my people. Kalira leaned back in her throne, her face unreadable. Speak. Once on Earth, humans owned other humans. We called it slavery. We treated people as property, as things to be bought and sold. We justified it in many ways. We said it was necessary for our economy. We said it was the natural order. We said that some people were meant to be free and others were meant to serve. Jimin's voice grew stronger. It took us hundreds of years to understand that this was wrong. Fundamentally terribly wrong. That no person should ever be owned by another, no matter what benefit it brings. He could see some of the assembled aliens shifting uncomfortably. He continued. We also practiced arranged marriage. Parents would trade their children like bargaining chips, marrying them off to forge alliances or gain wealth. We treated people, especially women, as property to be given away. And we told ourselves this was good, that it was tradition, that it served the greater good. Jimin looked directly at Kalira. It took us a long time to learn that people are not property. That no one should be traded or given away, regardless of what benefits it might bring. We learned that every person has inherent worth, that they deserve the right to choose their own path. These lessons cost us dearly. People died fighting for these principles. The hall was silent now, listening. If I accept your daughter's hand in marriage, Empress, I betray everything humanity claims to believe. I reduce Princess Valara to a symbol, a treaty written in flesh. I reduce myself to someone willing to accept another person as payment. And I teach my species that our principles only matter when they're convenient. The Empress sat perfectly still on her throne, her amber eyes fixed on Jimin with an intensity that made him want to step back. But he held his ground, meeting her gaze steadily. You speak of principles, Kalira said slowly, but principles do not protect worlds. Principles do not feed populations. Principles do not stop warships from burning your cities. She leaned forward. Are you truly willing to sacrifice your species for abstract ideals? Jimin felt the weight of that question. It was the same question Hyun had asked, the same question he had asked himself 1,000 times over the past 3 days. I hope I never have to find out, Empress, but I believe that a species that abandons its principles to survive has already lost something more important than its life. Pretty words, Lord Trennock called out from his seat in the assembly. But tell me, Captain, when your people were practicing this slavery you speak of, did they stop because of principles? Or did they stop because they were forced to? Jimin turned to face the old historian. Both. Some people fought to end slavery because they believed it was wrong. Others fought to preserve it because they benefited from it. It took a civil war, brother fighting against brother to finally end the practice. Hundreds of thousands died, but in the end, we chose to be better than we were. He addressed the whole assembly now, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. I know many species here practice arranged marriage. I know many of you see nothing wrong with it. I'm not here to judge your cultures or tell you how to live, but I am here to tell you that humanity has chosen a different path. A tall alien with blue scales stood up from the crowd. Captain Jimin, I am Ambassador Tella of the Draxon Collective. My species has practiced marriage alliances for 5,000 years. It has brought us stability, prosperity, and peace. Are you saying we are wrong? Jimin chose his words carefully. I'm saying that stability built on treating people as property is not true stability. I'm saying that prosperity purchased with someone's freedom is not true prosperity. I'm saying that peace that requires the sacrifice of individual choice is not true peace. Another voice called out, this time from a floating being that seemed to be made of light. But Captain, surely you understand that individuals must sometimes sacrifice for the collective good. That is the foundation of any society. Yes, Jimin agreed. But there's a difference between choosing to sacrifice and being sacrificed. Between volunteering and being volunteered. Between giving yourself freely and being given away. He turned back to face Kalira and Valara. Empress, you asked me why I refuse. The truth is, I'm not just refusing for myself. I'm refusing for Princess Valara. Valara's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her composed exterior. Because she deserves better than this, Jimin continued. She deserves the right to choose her own path. To marry someone she loves or not marry at all. To be valued for who she is, not for what alliances her marriage can create. She deserves to be a person, not a tool. You presume to speak for my daughter? Kalira's voice was dangerous now. No, Empress. I'm simply asking that she be allowed to speak for herself. Jimin looked at Valara directly. Princess, do you want this marriage? Not because it's your duty, not because it serves your empire, but because you as an individual want it. The hall held its breath. Valara stood frozen, her crystalline skin catching the light and scattering it in rainbow patterns. Her mouth opened, then closed. Jimin could see the struggle in her eyes, centuries of training and duty warring against something deeper, something fundamental. She started, then stopped, her hands clenched at her sides. I don't know. Those 3 words fell into the silence like stones into still water. The ripples spread outward, touching every being in the hall. You don't know? Kalira repeated, and for the first time, there was something other than anger in her voice. Confusion, concern. Valara, what do you mean you don't know? Valara turned to her mother, and suddenly she looked very young. Mother, I've spent my entire life learning to be what others need me to be. I've studied diplomacy and history and culture. I've prepared myself to be a bridge between peoples. But no one has ever asked me what I want. No one has ever suggested that what I want might matter. She looked back at Jimin, and there were tears forming in her eyes. Captain Jimin asked me 2 nights ago who I really am, underneath all the training and duty. I couldn't answer him. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. I've never been allowed to know. The tears spilled over, running down her crystalline cheeks like liquid diamonds. How can I say whether I want this marriage when I don't even know who I would be if I weren't a princess? When I've never been allowed to be anything else? Kalira stared at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. The mighty Empress, ruler of 300 worlds, looked suddenly uncertain. Jimin pressed on, knowing this was his only chance. Empress, I have a question for you. In 2,000 years of Valtorian history, in all the marriage alliances you've arranged, how many times did you ask the people involved if they wanted it? How many times did their happiness matter more than the political benefit? Kalira's silence was answer enough. I'm not saying that arranged marriages can never work, Jimin said. I'm not saying that duty and responsibility aren't important, but I am saying that they shouldn't be the only things that matter. That people, even princesses, even empresses, deserve the right to choose their own lives. He took a step closer to the throne, aware that he was probably breaking some protocol but not caring. You've ruled for centuries, Empress. You've made decisions that affected trillions of lives. You've built an empire on order and tradition, but have you ever stopped to ask whether that order is just, whether those traditions serve the people or simply perpetuate themselves? A reptilian ambassador hissed from the crowd. This is outrageous. A human, barely evolved from primitives, lecturing the Empress on justice? But Jimin wasn't done. On Earth, we had a saying, just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way. Tradition can be valuable, but it can also be a chain that binds us to the mistakes of the past. He thought of his sister Yuna, of her courage in choosing her own path despite their parents' expectations. He thought of Yunji, and the brief time they had chosen to spend together before fate took her away. He thought of every human who had ever fought for the right to live freely, to choose their own destiny. Humanity is young, Empress. We're barely out of our home system. We don't have your technology or your power or your ancient wisdom, but we've learned something important in our short history. We've learned that every person matters, that every individual has worth, that no one should be traded or given away no matter how much benefit it might bring. Jimin's voice grew stronger, more passionate. And yes, this belief has cost us. It's made things harder. It would be easier to go back to the old ways, to treat people as property when it's convenient. But we've chosen not to. We've chosen to believe that the hard right is better than the easy wrong. He looked around the hall at all the assembled aliens, at the representatives of dozens of species and cultures. I know many of you think humans are foolish, impractical, too idealistic to survive in a harsh galaxy. Maybe you're right. Maybe our principles will be our downfall. Then he met Kalira's eyes again. But I'd rather humanity fall while staying true to who we are than survive by becoming something we're not. I'd rather die free than live as someone who treats people as currency. And I'd rather face your fleet, Empress, than face my own reflection knowing I traded another person's life for my species' safety. The hall was absolutely silent. Jimin stood before the throne, his heart pounding, waiting for the Empress's response. He had said everything he came to say. He had told the truth as he understood it. Now there was nothing to do but wait for the consequences. For a long moment, nothing happened. Empress Kalira sat motionless on her throne, her amber eyes fixed on Jimin. The assembled court barely dared to breathe. Even the usual whispers and movements that filled such a large space had ceased completely. The silence was so profound that Jimin could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then Kalira spoke, her voice soft, but carrying throughout the hall. "You believe my daughter is not worthy of you?" It wasn't a question, but Jimin answered anyway. "No, Empress. That's not what I'm saying at all." "Then explain it to me," Kalira demanded, her voice growing harder. "You stand before the entire court and refuse the greatest honor my empire can bestow. You reject my daughter, the light of my realm, beloved by billions. If it is not her worth you question, then what?" Jimin took a deep breath. This was the crucial moment, the point where everything could go terribly wrong. He had to make the Empress understand, but he had to do it without insulting her or her culture. Empress worth is not the issue here. Princess Valara is clearly remarkable. She's intelligent, graceful, and has dedicated her life to serving her people. Any man would be fortunate to marry her. He paused. But only if she chooses him freely. Only if she wants it. Want, Kalira repeated the word as if it were foreign to her. You keep speaking of wants and choices as if they are the foundation of civilization. But civilizations are not built on individual desires, Captain. They are built on duty, sacrifice, and the willingness to place the collective good above personal preference. I agree that civilizations require sacrifice, Jimin said carefully, but I believe that sacrifice is only meaningful when it's chosen. When someone is forced to sacrifice, it's not nobility. It's just tragedy dressed up in formal language. Kalira's grip on her throne tightened. You are young and naive. You think freedom is the highest good, but you have not yet learned that absolute freedom leads to chaos. Structure, tradition, hierarchy, these things create order. They allow societies to function. Perhaps, Jimin acknowledged. But at what cost? Empress, answer me honestly. In 800 years of rule, have you ever asked your daughter what she wants? Have you ever considered that her happiness might be as important as her duty? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kalira's face showed nothing, but Jimin saw her eyes flick to Valara for just a moment. The princess stood with tears still on her cheeks, looking between her mother and Jimin with an expression of hope and fear mixed together. Happiness is a luxury, Kalira said finally. As a ruler, I cannot always afford such luxuries. Neither can my daughter. Then what is the point of all your power? Jimin asked, his voice passionate now. What is the purpose of ruling 300 worlds if not to make life better for those you govern? If your own daughter cannot even pursue happiness, what hope do the billions under your rule have? Ambassador Tella stood again from the crowd. Captain, you speak as if happiness is a right, but in the galaxy, survival is the only right. Everything else is negotiable. Jimin turned to face the Draxan ambassador, and that's exactly the problem. When we make everything negotiable except survival, we reduce ourselves to animals fighting over scraps. Yes, survival matters, but so does living with dignity. So does having control over your own life. So does being able to say no when someone tries to trade you like property. He looked back at Kalira. Empress, I'm not trying to attack your culture or your traditions. I'm trying to make you see that some systems, no matter how old or how successful they seem, are built on foundations that are fundamentally wrong. Slavery worked for thousands of years on Earth. It was economically successful. It created stable societies. But it was still wrong because it treated people as things. You compare my offer of alliance to slavery? Kalira's voice was ice. I compare any system that trades people without their consent to slavery, Jimin said firmly. It doesn't matter if you call it marriage or alliance or duty. If someone has no choice in the matter, if their wishes don't factor into the decision, then they are being treated as property. Valara made a small sound, almost a gasp. Kalira turned to look at her daughter, really look at her, and something in the Empress's expression shifted. Valara, Kalira said quietly, is this how you feel? That I have treated you as property? Valara's hands trembled. Jimin could see the battle raging inside her. Centuries of conditioning telling her to deny it, to reassure her mother, to fulfill her duty. But something else was fighting back now. Something that had been awakened by 3 days of conversations about choice and freedom. Mother, Valara said, her voice shaking, I love you. I respect you. I understand the burden you carry as Empress, but yes, sometimes I feel like I'm not a person to you. I'm a tool, a resource to be deployed where needed. The tears flowed freely now. I've spent my entire life preparing to be given away. Do you know how that feels? To know that your purpose is to be someone else's wife, someone else's alliance, someone else's bridge between worlds? Kalira stood slowly from her throne. For the first time since Jimin had met her, the Empress looked uncertain. She took a step toward her daughter. I did not know you felt this way, Kalira said softly. You never asked, Valara replied, and there was no accusation in her voice, only sadness. You never asked what I wanted or how I felt or who I might be if I weren't a princess. You assumed that because I performed my duties well, I was happy, or maybe you just didn't think my happiness mattered. Kalira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, less the commanding empress and more simply a mother. When I was young, my mother arranged my marriage to the previous emperor. I was terrified. I did not want it, but I did my duty and over time I came to respect him. We ruled well together, she paused. I assumed the same would be true for you. That duty would be enough, that you would find fulfillment in service. But did you ever love him? Valara asked quietly. Not respect. Not partnership. Love. Kalira's silence was answer enough. Jimin watched this exchange between mother and daughter, and he felt the weight of what was happening. He had come to this planet to seek an alliance, and instead he had somehow sparked something deeper. A question that had been buried under centuries of tradition was finally being asked out loud. Empress, Jimin said gently, drawing Kalira's attention back to him. I'm not saying that arranged marriages can never lead to happiness. I'm not saying that duty isn't important, but I am saying that people should have a choice. That Princess Valara should be able to decide her own path, even if that path is difficult. He took a step closer. You asked me if I think your daughter is not worthy. The truth is, I think she's far too worthy to be traded like a commodity. She deserves better than a man who accepts her hand, because it comes with political benefits. She deserves someone who chooses her for herself, not for what she represents. Kalira looked at him for a long moment. And what of you, Captain? You claim to refuse for her sake, but you also refuse for your own principles. Are you certain you are not simply using noble words to justify cowardice? The accusation stung because there was some truth in it. Jimin forced himself to be honest. I don't know, Empress. Maybe there's some cowardice in my decision. Maybe I'm hiding behind principles because I'm afraid of the responsibility. But even if that's true, it doesn't change the fundamental point. No one should be traded without their consent. Not your daughter, not me, not anyone. Hyun stepped forward suddenly, breaking his silence. Empress, if I may speak? Kalira gestured for him to continue. Captain Jimin is the bravest man I know, Hyun said firmly. He's facing down the most powerful empire in the galaxy to stand up for what he believes is right. That's not cowardice. That's courage, he paused. I disagreed with his decision. I thought he should accept your offer for humanity's sake. But watching him now, hearing him speak his truth, I understand. Some principles are worth dying for. Mirai stepped forward as well. And I stand with my captain. If humanity is to have any meaning in this galaxy, it must be as a people who value freedom and choice above convenience and security. Kalira looked at the three humans standing before her throne. Then she looked at her daughter, still crying silently. The Empress closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, something had changed. Empress Kalira raised her hand, and a wave of energy rippled through the hall. This assembly is dismissed. All representatives will leave immediately. I will speak with the humans privately. The assembled aliens looked shocked. Court proceedings were never interrupted like this, but no one dared question the Empress. Within minutes, the vast hall emptied, thousands of beings filing out through the many doors. Only Kalira, Valara, Jimin, Hyun, and Mirai remained in the enormous space. Kalira descended from her throne and walked across the floor toward them. Without her elevated position, without the crowd watching, she seemed somehow more human, more real. She stopped a few paces from Jimin. You have disturbed something in me, Captain Lee Jimin, she said quietly, something I thought was long buried. For 800 years I have ruled this empire. I have made decisions that affected trillions of lives. I have arranged marriages, formed alliances, and never once questioned whether the foundation of these actions was just. I only asked whether they were effective. She turned to look at her daughter. And now you stand before me telling me that effectiveness is not enough. That I have built my empire on a system that treats people as tools. And worst of all, you may be right. Valara moved closer to her mother. Mother, I don't blame you. You did what you thought was necessary. What you were taught was right. But it wasn't right, Kalira said, and there was pain in her voice. Was it? All these centuries, all these marriages I arranged, all the children I used as bridges between worlds, I told myself it was for the greater good, that their sacrifice created peace and prosperity. But I never asked if they wanted it. I never considered that their desires might matter as much as my political calculations. She looked back at Jimin. You humans are very young. You have only just reached the stars. Yet somehow you have understood something that I, in 800 years, failed to grasp. That treating people as means to an end, no matter how noble the end, diminishes both them and you. Empress, Jimin said carefully, I don't claim that humans have all the answers. We struggle with these questions constantly. We fail often, but we try to do better. We try to learn from our mistakes. Kalira was silent for a moment, then asked, what do humans propose instead? If I cannot arrange marriages to build alliances, how do I ensure stability? How do I create bonds strong enough to hold an empire together? You build alliances based on shared values, Jimin explained. Mutual respect. Common goals. You create relationships where both parties choose to work together because they believe in the partnership, not because they're forced into it by marriage or blood. That sounds slow, Kalira observed. Uncertain, fragile. It is all those things, Jimin admitted. Trust takes time to build. Alliances based on choice rather than obligation require constant work. There's no guarantee they'll last. But when they do work, they're stronger than any marriage bond because they're maintained by active choice, not passive acceptance. Hyun cleared his throat. Empress, if I may add something. On Earth we have a saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. But a rope made of many threads, each choosing to wind together, is stronger than any chain. That's what alliances of choice can be. Kalira considered this. And what of you, Captain? You refuse to marry my daughter. Does this mean you refuse all alliance with the Valtorian Empire? Not at all, Jimin said. I would welcome an alliance with your empire, but an alliance built on mutual benefit and shared values, not on a marriage neither party truly chose. I want to work with you because both our peoples believe it's the right path, not because I was willing to accept your daughter as payment. And if I told you that such an alliance, without the marriage bond, would come without the protections I offered, that humanity would have to prove itself worthy over time, rather than being immediately elevated to protected status? Jimin nodded. Then we would accept those terms. We would rather earn your trust than buy it with a person's freedom. Kalira turned to Valara. And you, my daughter? What do you want? If you could choose your own path, free from duty and obligation, what would you do? Valara looked terrified by the question. I don't know, Mother. I've never been allowed to think about it. Then perhaps it is time you learned, Kalira said softly. She turned back to Jimin. Captain, you spoke of your sister who defied your parents to pursue art. You spoke of learning and growing and becoming who you truly are. My daughter has never had such opportunities. She has only known the palace, the court, the weight of duty. Jimin could see where this was going. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I am proposing something that, by Valtorian standards, is radical, Kalira said. I propose that Princess Valara travel to Earth. Not as my daughter, not as a princess, but as a student. Let her learn about your human concept of freedom. Let her discover who she might be without the weight of her title. Let her make friends, pursue interests, live a life chosen rather than assigned. Valara's eyes went wide. Mother, I couldn't. The Empire needs me. My duties can wait, Kalira interrupted gently. I have ruled for 800 years. I can rule a few more without you beside me. And perhaps when you return, you will have insights that I lack, perspectives that can help us build a better empire. She looked at Jimin. Of course, this would require your cooperation, Captain. Would Earth accept my daughter as a visitor and student? Jimin's mind raced. This was not what he had expected. But as he thought about it, he realized it might be the perfect solution. I think Earth would be honored to host Princess Valara. We could arrange for her to attend university, to live among humans, to experience life without royal obligations. And if she chooses not to return? Kalira asked. If she decides she prefers freedom to duty? That was the real test. Jimin could see it in the Empress's eyes. She was not just offering her daughter a chance to learn. She was offering her a chance to leave, to reject everything she had been raised to be, and she was asking if humanity would support that choice. Then that would be her decision to make. Jimin said firmly, "No one should be forced to be something they don't want to be. Not even a princess." Kalira nodded slowly. "Very well. Here is my proposal, Captain Lee Jimin. I will not punish humanity for your refusal. I will not grant you immediate protection, but neither will I oppose you. You will have time to prove yourselves worthy of alliance through your actions rather than through marriage. And Princess Valara will travel to Earth to learn and grow and discover herself. At the end of 1 year, she may choose. She may return to her duties here, or she may forge a new path. Either way, I will accept her choice." She paused. "But understand this. I am doing this not because you convinced me you were right. I am doing this because you made me question myself for the first time in centuries. That questioning has value even if I am not yet certain where it will lead." Jimin bowed deeply. "Thank you, Empress. This is more than I hoped for." "Do not thank me yet," Kalira said. "By sending my daughter to Earth, I am trusting you with something infinitely precious to me. If any harm comes to her, if she is exploited or manipulated or hurt because of your human freedom, there will be consequences." "I understand," Jimin said, "and I promise you, we will treat her with the respect and care she deserves. Not as a political tool, but as a person." Valara stepped forward. "Captain Jimin, I want to thank you. For refusing, for speaking up, for asking me what I wanted." Her voice was stronger now, more certain. "I'm terrified of going to Earth. I've never been away from the palace. I don't know how to be anything other than a princess. But I want to learn. I want to discover who I am underneath all the training and expectations." She looked at her mother. "And Mother, I want you to know that I love you. I'm not doing this to escape you or to reject everything you taught me. I'm doing this to become a better version of myself, so that if I do return, I can serve the Empire not just out of duty, but out of genuine choice." Kalira's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. "I know, my daughter, and that is why I must let you go." The Empress straightened, becoming once again the ruler of 300 worlds. "We will make arrangements for the princess's journey. In the meantime, Captain, you and your crew are free to return to Earth. Inform your people of our agreement. We will begin building an alliance the human way, slowly and through trust." Jimin bowed again. "We won't disappoint you, Empress." As they turned to leave, Kalira called out one more time, "Captain Jimin." He stopped and looked back. "You said your species is young and might not survive in this harsh galaxy, but if all humans possess the courage you showed here today, I think you will do more than survive. You might teach the rest of us how to truly live." 6 months had passed since the day Jimin refused the Empress's offer. He stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars stream past as they traveled through hyperspace. His crew was heading to a potential alliance meeting with a smaller coalition of species, continuing humanity's careful expansion into galactic politics. "Captain, incoming message from Earth," Mireille called from her station. "It's from your sister." Jimin smiled. "Put it through." Yuna's face appeared on the screen, but she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, looking slightly awkward but happy, was Princess Valara. Except she didn't look much like a princess anymore. She wore simple human clothes, her hair was styled differently, and she was laughing at something Yuna had said. "Brother," Yuna called out cheerfully. "Look who helped me finish my latest painting. She has a good eye for color." Valara waved at the screen. "Hello, Captain Jimin. Or should I call you Jimin now? I'm still learning the informal human customs." "Jimin is fine," he replied, warmth in his voice. "How are you adjusting?" "It's strange," Valara admitted. "Wonderful and terrifying at the same time. Yesterday I went to a coffee shop by myself for the first time. I ordered a drink, sat down, and just watched people. No guards, no protocols, no one treating me like I was made of glass. It was the most normal moment of my life, and I almost cried from happiness." Yuna put an arm around her. "She's been an amazing student. She started university last month studying philosophy and human history. The professors don't even know she's an alien princess. To them, she's just Hana, a transfer student interested in ethics." Hana. Valara had chosen that name herself, Jimin remembered. It meant one in Korean, symbolizing a fresh start. A single person standing on her own, rather than as an extension of an empire. "I'm reading about your civil war," Valara said, her expression serious now. "About how humans fought each other over the question of slavery. So many died, so much pain, But you chose the hard right over the easy wrong, just like you said. She paused. I sent a long message to my mother last week. I told her about what I'm learning, about the human concept of human rights, about how difficult it is to build a just society. She wrote back. She said she's been reading human philosophy too. Kant, Rawls, others I haven't heard of yet. She said she's questioning things she never questioned before. Jimin felt a surge of hope. That's good. Change starts with questions. There's more, Valara continued. Apparently word of what happened at the court has spread across the empire. Other princesses and princes are asking questions too. On 3 different worlds, royal children have refused arranged marriages. It's causing problems, but also conversations. People are talking about choice and freedom in ways they never did before. Hyun leaned into view from his station. So you're starting a revolution, princess? Valara laughed. I hope not. Revolutions are violent and messy. I prefer to think of it as evolution. Slow change, but in the right direction. After the call ended, Jimin returned to watching the stars. Mirai came to stand beside him. You know, she said quietly, when you refused the Empress that day, I thought we were dead. I thought you'd signed humanity's death warrant. And now? Now I think you did something much harder than saving humanity. You showed the galaxy that we meant what we said about our values. That we weren't just words, she smiled. 6 months ago, no one took us seriously. Now we're getting meeting requests from a dozen different species. Not because we're powerful, but because they're curious about people who would risk everything for a principle. Jimin nodded. But we haven't gained the protection we went looking for. Humanity is still vulnerable. Still alone. Not as alone as we were, Hyun called from his station. We've formed 3 minor alliances in the past 6 months. Nothing like what the Valtorian Empire would have given us, but something. And we did it by being ourselves. The ship emerged from hyperspace near a blue dwarf star. A small fleet of vessels waited for them. Representatives from the Free Worlds Assembly, a coalition of independent species who had banded together for mutual protection. We're being hailed, Mirai reported. On screen. An alien face appeared. Reptilian with large eyes and delicate scales. Captain Jimin of Earth. I am Kree, speaker for the Free Worlds. We've heard interesting stories about you, about how you refused the Valtorian Empire's offer, about how you spoke of choice and freedom before the assembled court. The stories are true, Jimin confirmed. Kree's expression was hard to read, but his voice sounded amused. Many species would call that foolish. We call it brave. The Free Worlds Assembly was formed by peoples who refused to submit to larger empires, who chose independence over security. We understand the value of freedom. He paused. We would like to discuss an alliance with humanity. Not a marriage, just cooperation between free peoples who respect each other's choices. Jimin felt a weight lift from his chest. We would be honored to discuss such an alliance. Far away on Valtros Prime, Empress Kalira sat in her private chambers reading the latest report from Earth. It contained updates on Valara's progress, but also something else. A philosophical treatise on freedom and duty, written by her daughter as part of her university studies. Kalira read her daughter's words carefully. Valara wrote about the tension between individual rights and collective responsibility, about how true loyalty could only come from choice, about how the strongest societies were those where people served not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The Empress set down the report and looked out at her empire, at the hundreds of worlds spinning beneath her gaze. She thought about the thousands of marriages she had arranged, the alliances she had built, the order she had created. Effective, yes. Stable, certainly, but just... She touched a control panel and summoned Lord Trennock. The old historian arrived quickly. Yes, Empress? I want you to compile a complete history, Kalira said. Every political marriage in Valtorian history for the past 2,000 years. I want to know how many succeeded in their political aims. But more importantly, I want to know how many of those married were happy. How many chose their path versus how many were simply obedient. Trennock looked surprised. Empress, such information may not exist. We've never tracked happiness as a metric of success. Then perhaps that's part of the problem, Kalira said quietly. Begin the research. Take as long as necessary. I want to understand what we've built this empire on, and whether that foundation is as solid as I believed. After Trennock left, Kalira walked to her window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, her daughter was learning to be herself. Somewhere out there, a young human captain was proving that courage came in many forms. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, ideas were spreading, questions were being asked, and change was beginning. On Earth, Valara sat in a small apartment that she shared with 2 human roommates. They didn't know she was a princess. They just knew her as Hana, the quiet alien student who asked a lot of questions and made surprisingly good noodles. She was working on an essay about freedom when her communicator chimed. A message from her mother. Her heart raced as she opened it. "My daughter," the message began, "I have been thinking much about what you have written to me, about choice and duty and the right of every being to determine their own path. I cannot say I fully understand yet. 800 years of thinking one way does not change overnight. But I am trying. I am questioning. And that, I think, is what Captain Jimin wanted me to do. Not to agree with him necessarily, but to at least ask whether there might be a better way. I am proud of you, Valara. Not for the duties you performed, but for the courage you showed in leaving to find yourself. When you are ready, whether that is in 6 months or 60 years, you may return home, or you may not. Either way, you will have my love and my respect. You are my daughter, not because of the role you fill, but because of who you are. I am still learning what that means." Valara read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she called Yuna. "She understands," Valara said when her friend answered. "My mother is starting to understand," Yuna smiled. "Of course she is. You don't rule for 800 years without being smart enough to recognize truth when you finally see it." Across the galaxy, on 14 different worlds, young beings of various species looked up at the stars and dared to dream that they might have a choice, that their lives might be their own, that duty and happiness might not have to be enemies. The empire of the Valtorians continued to function as it always had, but underneath the surface, in quiet conversations and private thoughts, something was shifting. A question had been planted, and questions once asked are difficult to unask. Captain Lee Jimin continued his missions, building alliances one conversation at a time. Humanity remained vulnerable, still learning the dangers and wonders of the galaxy, but they faced the future as themselves, uncompromised and free. And sometimes, late at night when his shift was over, Jimin would think about that day in the Hall of Assembly. The day he refused a princess and spoke truth to an empress. The day he gambled his species' safety on a principle. He still didn't know if it had been the right choice. History would judge that, but he knew it had been a human choice. And in the end, that was what mattered most.